Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome to the Courageous Leadership Series. I'm Mandy Holloway, co-founder of Courageous Leaders. Thrilled to be bringing this series to you with the underlying aim of unleashing the real potential of your business, and as a business owner, some of the things that you can do. Today's episode is all about how to embrace conflict and use it to create true collaboration. In my experience, if there's any episode that is going to challenge you and rattle your cage, it's this one. So really invite you to ask questions, share your insights through all the different social media avenues that you have, and I'll give you some more addresses later on. But get involved, ask, share. Would love to engage in a conversation with you. So, as I said before, conflict is something, I think, if you're truly going to have a good hard look at yourself and the habits you currently have, particularly around conflict, how you feel about it, what you think about it, it's time to rattle your cage. And I know for me, as a business leader, as my team grew, getting okay with conflict was really tricky. And I got to understand the beliefs that I'd brought to it, my upbringing. There's a whole lot of stuff that impacts on your attitude and your skills towards dealing with conflict. So really going to encourage you to sit with the discomfort of being uncomfortable and bring curiosity to how you're going to explore this concept today. I want us to get on the same page with conflict. And I'm going to go through 6 little snapshots to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about when we talk about conflict. I find it quite interesting. Many very, very senior leaders in very large corporates will go to me, no, I don't want a session on conflict. We don't have conflict. That's an unacceptable and inappropriate word in our team. And it's really quite funny that people have this belief system and fear around conflict. If anybody's heard of any of the work of Patrick Lencioni, Patrick Lencioni has written a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I've mentioned it in earlier episodes where I talked about the fact at the bottom of his pyramid, he talks about there being an absence of trust. And at the next level up, he says there's a fear of conflict. So we need to stop fearing conflict. So let's get on the same page with what does conflict mean? It's an interesting word. It's a word that many people, as I say, despise, don't want to use, have a great fear of. Well, quite simply, there's a disagreement between people where somebody perceives that there's a threat to their needs, their feelings, their interests, or their concerns. And the interesting thing is that the perception, and we've probably all been in this situation, where the perception can be far worse than the absolute reality. But because we don't want to go and talk about it, it becomes bigger and bigger. And we fear it, so we move away from it. And the more we move away from it, the more that threat and that perception of the threat gets greater and greater. So conflict there's a perceived threat to my needs, my concerns, my feelings, my interests. It can be really simple. It can be as simple as the threat to my feeling of safety, my feeling of belonging, that is threatening me. And until I talk about it, it's going to impact on the way I turn up. So, very simple definition, that there's perceived threat, we have different needs, we have different concerns, we have different feelings. How does it arise? It arises in that there's that perception of threat. It arises because we're encouraging people to be individuals. We want people to come, and if you remember that drawing that I did in one of the earlier episodes where I talked about if we want innovation, then we want divergent thinking. We want people to come with a different way of looking at the world. Therefore, we're going to have people with different needs, different ideas, which means we're going to have conflict. So it arises every single day. I find it fascinating, as I say, when I get people that say, oh, I got a high-performing team, we don't have any conflict. And I go, well, you can't be a high-performing team because that means people are avoiding saying what they really want to say because they don't want to create conflict. They don't want to rock the boat. So it arises when we have people having the courage to share what they're really thinking and feeling and wanting to work in that open space. What happens when conflict arises? This is where I'm going to refer to a couple of little stories, is that when conflict arises, people respond emotionally, they respond cognitively, and they also respond physically. So emotionally, when we experience conflict, and if you go back and think through, I know that I referred to earlier Kubler-Ross, the change cycle. So if you weren't part of the episode, you can always Google Kubler-Ross or go onto our page and have a look. Human beings go through a range of emotions. And this happens when they're exposed to change, but it also happens when they're exposed to conflict. They can go into denial, they can be quite shocked, they can get really angry, they can get frustrated. There's a range of emotions that people go through. And it's not because they're emotional, it's because we're human beings and we are hardwired to have emotion. So they're going to react emotionally, and that's what happens. The other thing that happens is cognitively, and I'm going to read out a little story because I think this is a funny one. These are our ideas and thoughts about a conflict, often present as inner voices or internal observers in the midst of a situation. So I want you to imagine another person has just barged in front of you, taking the parking spot where you were just about to pull into at your local shopping mall. Your self-talk could be any one of these. What a jerk! Who does he think he is? Probably followed by a really rude finger gesture. Or, and maybe the honk of the horn. The other way we could respond is, oh, I wonder if he realises what he's done. He seems lost in his own thoughts. Gee, I hope he's okay. When I say this in a workshop, everyone goes, nah, not. Probably more the first one, Mandy. The other one could be, oh my gosh, I hope I find another one soon. I don't really want to say anything to him in case he gets mad at me, you know, road rage and all that kind of stuff as you go driving off looking for another one with your head down going, oh, don't rock the boat, don't say anything. So we have those choices when a conflict arises to actually make cognitive choices around how we're going to respond. The other one, which I think is fascinating, and when I'm in that moment of conflict and knowing what is happening to me, this is one I remind myself of very regularly. I'm going to read the paragraph out because it's really powerful. And it comes from a book called People Skills, written by Robert Bolton. When we're angry or fearful, our adrenaline flows faster and our strength increases by about 20%. The liver pumping sugar into the bloodstream demands more oxygen from the heart and the lungs, and the veins become enlarged, and the cortical centres where thinking takes place do not perform nearly as well. The blood supply to the problem-solving part of the brain is severely decreased because under stress, a greater portion of blood is diverted to the body's extremities. This is an emotional condition that the person is in. And it means that while you're beautifully equipped for a brawl, you're very poorly equipped to get a problem solved. So as you feel those physiological changes, and we're going to talk about them in the next episode, so that you can become more aware of what's happening for you, you should be going note to self, problem-solving part of the brain about to be hijacked. I am not going to be solving problems in a great way right in this moment. And we've got to start being aware of that and bring emotional resilience, which is what we're going to look at in the next episode. But it's important to recognise that that's exactly what happens when conflict arises. Physiologically, our body changes, which can be why we fear it so much. I think it's really important to differentiate the ignition of conflict from the eruption of it. And how I would position that is that I think we need to actively step in at a much earlier stage to actually ignite the conflict. Actually saying to people that it's okay to have conflict. It's an important part of being in business and working in a team. And that if we were to ignite conflict at much earlier stages, we would be able to resolve it much more constructively. But when we ignore it, it doesn't go away. It just gets buried deeper and deeper. Daniel Goleman talks about our emotions are always with us, but we're seldom with them. I think it's really very accurate. In our busyness in the business world, we keep pushing the emotions down, ignoring them, because it's all very uncomfortable, and we've been told there's no space in emotion for emotion in business. But what happens is, like a volcano, that lava bubbles away until one day it just goes wah, like Mount Vesuvius. And you usually erupt at the silliest thing, where people go, what's got up his nose, right? Because they've held on to stuff for far too long. So as a business leader, you are much better off to step in and actively ignite conflict than to wait for it to erupt and try and clean up the mess, because that is far more difficult, because the emotion is really at its worst and it is very, very raw. You'll notice that there will be very clear links to the diagram that I put up regularly in the episodes where I talk about, we need to create awareness. And I've talked about the feedback conversation creates awareness. We need people to accept the feedback. Now, when we're in that process, that's where conflict is often caused, because people are angry, they're in denial, they don't want to accept the feedback.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit Bryn.ai or search the App Store today.